Hey, welcome to Minerva. I'm Vera, and today I thought we could do something a little bit different because I wanted to show you my trip to Scotland from a kind of disabled/wheelchair using point of view. Our journey started at 4 a.m. when we had to get the subway to the train station. It was so early and we were so surprised by how many people were still awake or were already awake. But this was a good journey and we had no troubles there. At Hauptbahnhof, I needed to use the toilet, and I know that they have accessible toilets, but they do close the doors, so you have to go and find someone who works there at the toilets to get the key. And we couldn't find this person anywhere because, it was 4 a.m. Apparently, disabled people don't pee at night. And I'm not quite sure what you could do in that situation if you are not or less ambulant than I am, because I ended up having to go to the normal women's bathroom. But these are not gates that you can go through with your wheelchair. So I'm not quite sure what you could do except for hoping that another traveller shows up and can grab the employee off the toilet so that they can open the door for you. And I found this really annoying because why not just leave the accessible toilets open? Then it was time to go to the platform and board the train. The conductors were really friendly and asked if we needed assistance, which we declined, but I'm sure that if we had said yes, they would call someone to bring the ramp out for us. This has happened to me every single time that I've used an ice train, but I know that it's different for other people, so don't depend on this. You can also call ahead and make sure that there's a ramp available, or email them, which is something that I would recommend rather than just hoping that the conductor happens to see you. The ice itself was beautiful though. They had a disabled spot, somewhere where you could sit in your wheelchair. And they also had huge accessible toilets. These toilets they had the push bars next to the toilet. They were huge, so there was plenty of space to maneuver your wheelchair inside. And there was also enough space to roll underneath the sink, which is something that doesn't really happen very often. So our first stop was Cologne. We barely had any time here, about roughly 30 minutes. So this was mostly spent just to get into the next platform. And every time we go to Cologne, we have about 30 minutes to catch our next train. So it's become kind of a running joke between Charlie and I that we can see the cathedral of Cologne on the train station, but nothing else. This station was incredibly busy and there were a lot of people with wheelie cases waiting around for the elevator. But apart from this station was completely fine. We also did not have assistance on the train to our next stop, which is Brussels. But this is something that we chose. And I'm sure had we called ahead for assistance, we would have been granted it. But the theme of this holiday was kind of accepting help, something that we have learned to do. The ice train from Cologne to Brussels was perfectly fine. Huge accessible toilets, huge spots. They have chargers and everything. So there's really no complaint in that. And when we finally arrived in Brussels, we again did not have a lot of time here. So most of our time in Brussels this time was spent going from Bruxelles Nord to Bruxelles Midi, which we took another train to, and we didn't have to change platforms. This train was a little bit less accessible in my opinion, because we couldn't quite find an accessible carriage to put a wheelchair. It was still possible. However, on Brussels Midi, we did have assistance. Before we got to the Eurostar, we had to do a bit of shopping though, because we didn't bring enough food with us to last us until the evening. Bruxelles Midi is an amazingly big station. They have food places, they have chocolate places, they also have a Carrefour. I didn't fit into the Carrefour with my wheelchair, so I had to go to the exit to find someone who worked there, so they could open a gate for me to go into the Carrefour. Now, I don't know if any of you have already taken the Eurostar before, but if you do, you have to go through customs. And on Bruxelles Midi, there was a separate queue for people who use a wheelchair or have mobility issues. This was amazing because it shortened our wait so much, and there weren't very many people standing in the queue as well. So we felt a lot more relaxed going through the metal detectors, which was great because we had a lot of stuff and we had to take everything off, put all of our equipment into separate tins. You know, it's pretty much like going through the airport. They also have metal detectors, which I have never been through with a wheelchair, but it was fine. They sent me through the metal detector and then they put me to the side because they wanted to search me. And to be honest with you, I've never had a more thorough pat down as I've had on Bruxelles Midi. Everything. Arms, bra, inside my bra cup, everything. It was so weird. But after this, we could continue to customs and passport checks. Again, there was a separate queue for people with mobility issues. And I keep saying there's a queue, but it wasn't really because there were barely any other people there. But it was more a separate area to go through. If you requested a ramp and you book your Eurostar ticket, they would tell you to go to the business lounge in Brussels and wait there until they come and pick you up. Honestly, the business lounge was more luxury than I've ever seen in my entire life. It was amazing. Luxury chairs, they had free food, free drinks, you could charge your phones. They also had a separate bathroom, but I didn't use that one, so I can't report on how accessible it is. But there is an accessible toilet in just a normal gendered toilet. So in my case, you know, just the women's. And this was also actually a very good toilet. It was just a little bit small for me to fit my wheelchair inside. But I do have quite a big wheelchair. Like I said before, they go and pick you up when you have requested assistance with boarding the train. So we were picked up by someone to go and help us into the train. They did push my wheelchair, which I didn't really appreciate very much, but also this was fine. And again, we got to skip actually all of the queues. We were walked to a different elevator that was really spacious and took us to the platform. And we were told to wait so he could do the ramp, and he was going to put the ramp down. And I think this is also available for people who have a lot of luggage. So that's nice as well. Now the ramp in Bruxelles Midi was just an ordinary ramp, which you will find out later in the video that isn't always the case. Again, they insisted on driving me up the ramp themselves, so I couldn't do that, which again is a bit awkward, but in the grand scheme of things, it was totally fine. And honestly, the Eurostar was so amazing. It was super spacious. They had bumped us up to the business lounge or the business carriage in the train as well. So it was super spacious. There were only 6 other people in the entire carriage. There was so much space. You could charge everything again there. And also they gave us free meals. And I'm not quite sure if this is a business class thing or if this is a normal class thing. And we also didn't pay to go into the business class. We think that they upgraded us because of the wheelchair, because that's where the accessible spots are, but we're not entirely sure. I think they just do it to everyone who uses a wheelchair, which is amazing. And the food was also incredibly good. It was just like airplane food.
What's it like?
I don't know.
Describe the texture to me.
It's kind of like a gummy bear, but then you bite into it and there's like a jelly.
What flavour is it? Doesn't have a flavour.
Something vaguely berry?
My favourite flavour, vague berry.
It's kind of nice.
And this train journey lasted about 2 hours, I believe. And about 20 minutes of that or so was in the tunnel. So I have no complaints about that whatsoever. And honestly, I don't understand why people who use a wheelchair would ever fly to England again. Because we've all heard the horror stories of flying when you're a wheelchair user. They damage your wheelchair, they don't always have a seat available to take you to the toilet and everything. It just sounds really, really horrible. On the Eurostar, you are in your chair at all times. So there are accessible toilets. These are a little bit less good than in the ice, to be honest. They're a little bit smaller, but they still are perfect. Because you are in your chair, you can wheel yourself in and out of the toilet without having to depend on anyone else, which is so good. And also on our arrival in London, we had assistance as well. They had a ramp, they were waiting for us. So this also was not an issue at all. So we had about an hour in London before our train to Edinburgh went. So I really wanted to go to this radical bookstore that is really close to the station. I believe it's called Houseman Books, but I will pop the name up on the screen because the bookstore is amazing. And I could have spent the entire day there, to be honest. Or we literally only had an hour in London. So we literally had to run to the bookstore. And I mean, really running. Charlie was running with the big bags. And we had 10 minutes in the bookstore. And then we literally had to run back to the station again. But it was worth it to me because the bookstore was amazing. I bought this book in the bookstore and I'm reading it right now. And it's really good. I can totally recommend to anyone. It's called It's Not That Radical by Michaela Loach, and it's super interesting. We had to literally run back again to the station, and then we found out that our train was cancelled, so we had another hour. We took the LNER from London to Edinburgh, and when they found out that I used a wheelchair, they made sure that we could sit in the next train earlier and make sure that we had a seat that way, which was very much appreciated. The journey from London to Edinburgh itself was completely unremarkable. It was just a train journey. It was a nice train journey. They had an accessible spot. I think by that point, we had been traveling for roughly 18 hours or so. So I was really desperate to get out of my chair and walk around a little bit. So I haven't really made sure if the toilet was accessible as well, but I do remember it being accessible. And we arrived in Edinburgh at 12:30 a.m. This was a bit delayed from what time we were supposed to arrive, but it was fine. And we arrived in Edinburgh at the absolute best time possible, because when we left the train station, it was dark, of course, but there was this beautiful fog all over the city, and the city was dark, of course, but it was such a beautiful introduction to Edinburgh, and I don't think we could have had it better any other way. And at the train station, one of my friends was waiting to pick us up. And Ray and Dean, if you're watching this, thank you so much for letting us stay with you. It was amazing. We had an amazing time. But yeah, obviously we went to sleep straight away, and then the next day decided to go to Edinburgh Historic Centre, and first we wanted to buy some food. And this was actually quite the endeavour. I don't think we had expected it to be this difficult at all. I have to eat the low histamine diet because of chronic urticaria, and we were not expecting it to be so difficult to find any cafe or food in the supermarkets for that diet. I don't think it's quite as difficult here in Germany, but I'm not sure because we also didn't really have access to a kitchen. So lots of our food we were trying to eat like prepackaged food, but this was quite difficult. So I ended up surviving on bread, jam and crackers. Eating that diet for a week was fine, but I'm not sure I'd want to do it for much longer than that. So we ended up taking a bus outside of the city centre for 20 minutes to go to the Waitrose to buy some food for me. And to be honest with you, supermarket food has never tasted as well as that day. But we took the bus back and we walked around in the old town of Edinburgh. And honestly, it is so beautiful there. I also did really underestimate how steep Edinburgh is everywhere, and that made it quite difficult to push my own wheelchair around. There were definitely times where I almost lost control of the wheelchair because it was so steep going down the hill, and I almost drove in front of traffic. Also, Old Town Edinburgh has a lot of cobblestones, which makes it also kind of difficult to use your wheelchair there. But again, to me, it was worth it, and the bits of the town that I really couldn't do, I had Charlie there to push me. But please be aware of this before you decide to go to Edinburgh yourself as well. And then it was finally time to go to the castle. Edinburgh has this amazing castle in the middle of town that used to be a military barracks, or it might still be, but it's beautiful. It's also incredibly steep to go up there. There is a shortcut where you can take the stairs so you don't have to walk all around. But obviously because of the wheelchair we couldn't do that, so we did go all the way around. And I was not sad about this because it was incredible. The view from the castle is so beautiful, and the view of the castle is really beautiful as well. But the view away from the castle, you get to see Edinburgh and some of the countryside behind it, and it's gorgeous. The castle itself is also quite beautiful. It's a very old, beautiful building. We were really impressed with the accessibility of Edinburgh Castle. We looked online beforehand to make sure if this was going to be accessible or not, and we were really impressed by the sheer amount of information that is on the website. It's not just people with mobility issues. It's not just people who use wheelchairs. They know about ambulant wheelchair users, which is something that I've not often experienced. They also have information for autistic people, visually impaired people, deaf and hard of hearing, and also dementia. So it was a really good amount of information they had available. But also the information they had available for people who use wheelchairs was incredibly detailed. It was what type of road there was, how steep the road is, what stones are there, how many steps. Everywhere where you could take steps, it was indicated how many steps to take. They also, which I presume is for autistic viewers, tell you exactly what to expect when. They tell you when the cannonball shots will be, how many there will be, etc., etc. Like, it's really, really good. And this does seem to be the norm in Scotland, just everywhere. But we were really surprised because we live in Germany, and there the information basically is, I don't know, go and figure it out yourself. So when we arrived to Edinburgh Castle, there were ticket scans, and at the ticket scan we were asked whether or not we'd like to use the mobility van. So I asked, well, I'm not sure how steep it is. How steep is it? And they knew exactly how steep it was. So I decided to indeed take the mobility van because honestly, there was no way I could have pushed myself all the way up without help. Just no way.
So where are we here?
We are in Edinburgh Castle. Well, we are waiting outside for the mobility van to come and pick us up because apparently it's very steep.
And we're saving our energy to look around
Yes.
and think rather than do stuff.
Yes.
We're not here to do
Edinburgh's
stuff.
very hilly, and it was quite a disaster going up here in the first place. So
I was very glad that we chose the mobility van. We were taken to a separate area in front of the castle, so everyone did see us, but we weren't waiting in the queue. We were actually waiting next to one of the guardsmen that are there. We had to wait for a little bit, but this was fine. We were not in a rush. It was amazing weather. The sun was out. It was not windy. It was just genuinely a pleasant day to be outside. When the mobility van did come, I was given the option if I wanted to stay in my chair in the van or if I wanted to transfer to just the back seat, which I did choose. But yeah, there was a ramp. They wheeled my wheelchair into the car without any issues, and we were just sat on the back seat. And to be honest, we felt like royalty in this car. We got to use the military tunnel, which isn't open to the general public, and we also got to use the back roads of the castle. If there is one, it sounds a bit weird, but I think there is one. And the view was also incredibly beautiful. The windows of the car were blackened from the outside as well, so Charlie and I felt really like important people. Yeah. As there's information everywhere in Scotland that I could see about how not every disability is visible, I am sure that if you have mobility issues but you don't look disabled, they will allow you into the mobility van without an issue. So don't feel bad about asking this as well. I never got the impression that making accommodations for disabled people was like a big thing or not really something that they wanted to do. I felt really accepted, something that I don't always feel like in Germany, and not just accepted but also welcomed. So in the van they give you a map of the castle with where attractions are, I suppose, and you can choose where you'd like to be dropped off. We chose to go all the way to the top and then slowly make our way back down. Spoiler alert, we did not manage to walk down, but more about that later. When we got to the top of the castle, you're dropped almost in a square, and where we were dropped off, there were a bit of cobblestones, but the square itself is totally flat, which makes for easy, scooting about in the wheelchair. To be fair, like I said before, there are a lot of cobblestones in the castle, but every exhibition that I know of is totally accessible. Some do just always have a ramp, so you don't need to ask anyone to help you. And some you do need to go up and ask if they can open the ramps for you. As soon as we made it onto the square, there was an employee who told us exactly what was possible accessibility-wise. So she told us, look, there's going to be a change of the guard, so please, make your way to the back of the square and wait for a little bit. But after that, you can choose to go into the Great Hall, which is always accessible. There's always a ramp there. Or you can choose to go to the Memorial or the Crown Jewels of Scotland. And for those, you do need to let them know that you want to go there, because the roads are blocked for non-disabled people. The changing of the guard was weird, to be honest. It was nice to experience, but not something I'd ever want to see again. And then we decided to go into the Great Hall. The Great Hall was quite impressive, but like I said, there's always a ramp there, so no problem whatsoever. After that, we decided to first go to the Crown Jewels of Scotland. But yeah, we were once again super impressed by the knowledge about mobility issues of the staff. I never felt like I was expected to be paralyzed or completely unable to walk. I think some other ambulant wheelchair users kind of recognize this feeling, perhaps, that you feel a bit awkward when you get up from the wheelchair, almost like you're fooling people. And I never had that feeling in Scotland. But also, again, I was so impressed by the knowledge of staff. It was never expected that I couldn't do anything because of the wheelchair. It was always this is not totally accessible. There's one exhibition, the apartments, that is not accessible. You have to get up, or you have to go down the stairs at first and then up the stairs. But they said exactly how many steps there were. So they gave me the chance to decide whether or not this was something that I could do. In the end, we decided not to, we just didn't want to. So the Memorial building is accessible, but you have to go and approach staff to let you in. And when we approached staff, they asked us if we could please not touch the guardsman, because the ramp is right in front of him. And I'm glad they did. I'm glad there is, awareness about sexual harassment, but it is really sad that it's necessary. Don't touch anyone without their consent, people. The memorial was extremely impressive. It was about the Scottish soldiers who were killed in the First World War, and also women who were killed in the First World War, when they were mechanics or nurses, so that was also good to see. The crown jewels of Scotland, however, were a bit disappointed for us, maybe also because the elevator was in an area that is not normally open to the public, but it is gorgeous there. And it also seemed like there used to be an exhibition there, but they stopped it. And that was actually where we wanted to go to, rather than seeing the crown jewels of Scotland. We really wish we could just walk around in the castle, but yeah, that's not possible, of course. After this, we decided to walk down a bit to a chapel that was there. And that chapel is always completely accessible. It always has a ramp. It is quite steep, so I'm not sure if I could have done it without help, but you know, the ramp is there. After we've been to the chapel, we decided to walk all the way down. And this was a mistake, to be honest, because it was so steep at certain parts that I lost control of the wheelchair. So we asked to be picked up by the mobility van, which you can do at every spot on the map. And I believe that every employee can call for the mobility van there. So this was not a problem at all. Again, we felt extremely luxurious, having our own driver transport us down through the castle, do you know what I mean? But yeah, the whole accessibility thing was done so well there. I can only speak of wheelchair usage, of course, but I felt really comfortable, I felt really taken seriously, and I also felt like they put a lot of effort into mobility issues and also put a lot of effort into the right things, which is also very important.
The beauties of Edinburgh.
Then, you know, after the castle, we just walked around Edinburgh, waiting for our friends to be done with work so we could go for dinner. The next day we spent with our friends and we just drove around Edinburgh and the surrounding areas, which was really nice. We went to Arthur's Seat, which is really beautiful. It has a beautiful lake. It's normally a hiking area, and I don't think the heights there are necessarily accessible, but I also didn't check. But there is also a drive up the mountain. So even if you can't walk and you can't hike, you can still see a bit of the mountain and see a bit of the view. There was also an incredibly pretty lake over there. Then we went to Carlton's Head, which we drove up all the way. It was also very nice, had a beautiful view. And then we went to South Queensferry, which was also very nice, but incredibly steep everywhere. I again lost control of my wheelchair a couple of times, and I think the cobblestones make that more difficult because both of your wheels are not always on the ground at the same time, which makes it fairly impossible to brake. I also in South Queensferry almost toppled with my wheelchair sideways because the road was really narrow and there was a really steep bit right on the road. We did have amazing ice cream there and the view over the ocean was really nice, but bear this in mind if you do decide to go there. That is also the day where we went to a plant store to buy a wedding gift for two of our friends, and that plant store was incredible. I forgot the name right now, but I will try to put it up on the screen somewhere if you want to go there too. That plant store was incredibly accessible. Then we just had dinner at home. So the next day, the Wednesday, we had to catch the train to Glasgow. So before that, we had a tea in a really nice shop around the Ginger Twist studio in Edinburgh as well. The cheese shop was incredibly nice. It was again really accessible. The toilet was massive and accessible, but like massive. I think you could fit 10 wheelchairs next to each other in there, so that was really amazing too. And I was really surprised by that because every cafe we went to, which wasn't that many, but still enough, was accessible, had accessible toilets. And we didn't research that particular cafe at all. And I'm not sure if the friends we met out did research the cafe we went to, but they were all accessible. which is so different than in Germany. Here you are lucky if a cafe is accessible, if you even fit inside with your wheelchair, to be honest. Then after that we went to Ginger Twist Studio, which is a yarn shop in Edinburgh. It's really nice, super small. It was hard for the wheelchair and another person to fit inside, so Charlie had to kind of, wait behind me. But I don't know if she was an employee or the owner of the store, but she was super nice and super helpful and not pushy. I think sometimes when I'm in my wheelchair, I get presumed that I need a lot of help. And I have not had that experience in Scotland at all. But I've also only been to Edinburgh and Glasgow, so I cannot speak for the entirety of Scotland. But it was super nice to experience that. Yeah, then we walked to the train station, to Waverley Station, which is also an amazing accessible station in Edinburgh. They do have an accessible toilet, but I couldn't find the lock, so I couldn't lock the door. So just bear that in mind if you do need a toilet. Maybe someone can wait outside for you. On Waverley Station, there is a desk that is specifically for assistance for mobility issues. So we went there and we asked for assistance to get on the train. We asked for the ramp, and this was not an issue at all. They help you go through the gates that are there. They have one wide gate for walkers and prams and wheelchairs and everything. So that was really nice. She put the ramp down so I could go into the train myself, which was also really nice. And they also would call ahead to Hindland, the station where we needed to get off in Glasgow, to make sure that there was assistance. This train was also incredibly accessible, had an accessible toilet, had an accessible spot to sit. So that was also very nice. And I have to give a special shout out to the conductor on that train, because I don't think that he's ever needed to put a ramp down before. So he was incredibly nervous putting that down for me. But it was fine, I didn't die, I could get off of the train fine, so just thank you. And then we were in Glasgow. I think I'm going to pause this video here because I think it's already a pretty long video. And I think I'm going to talk about Glasgow next week. So make sure to like and subscribe so you know when that video is going live. Bye!